Hi folks, so today is the 14th of November and tomorrow is going to be 1 week after the Taurus lunar eclipse. And in a sense, it sort of marks the end of the 2022 eclipses. Now, eclipses are never over. We're always under the shadow of a solar eclipse that's going to culminate in a lunar eclipse. And we had a solar eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. To be specific, excuse me, while I pull this information, we had it in Scorpio on October 25th, and we have a corresponding lunar eclipse next year in 2023 on May the 5th, also in Scorpio. So we are under the shadow of this arching eclipse cycle of release in the sign of Scorpio, and where Scorpio sits in your chart and what house it occupies. But also, once you've passed, 1 week after the culminating lunar eclipse, the last lunar eclipse in a year, in a calendar year, and these are all sort of imaginary, especially when it comes to solar years or sort of the Gregorian calendar and not a lunar year, they're kind of weird time measures that we do. Not entirely weird, but you know what I mean. I think you know what I mean. I hope you know what I mean. It's so funny, now that I've said that, now my mind is sort of arguing with itself with regard to what is a normal calendar and what is not a normal calendar. So let me just bring myself back to task and talk about the eclipses. The bottom line is, it's possible that for many of us, an eclipse-like event took place in the first couple of weeks of September that has reached some sort of culmination as we leave 1 week after the last lunar eclipse tomorrow. And as we leave it, I think it's worth contemplating where the sign of Taurus sits in your chart, what house it occupies, where the sign of Scorpio sits in your chart, what house it occupies, and where the sign of Aquarius sits and what house it occupies and what those houses stand for. The eclipses of leaning into our development, our growth, our lessons, where we are in our evolution towards moving towards those things that call us and have excitement and energy and the life force. Right now, that is occurring in the sign of Taurus. That's where the North Node is transiting. That's where the North Node eclipses are happening. Where we need to release something is in the Scorpio side of your chart. Now, leaning into, releasing, when we talk about Taurus and Scorpio broadly, there's a need to look at your own financial security and independence as opposed to codependency. So a general broad theme in this particular eclipse cycle is the examination of and the leaning into and the building your own nest, your own foundation, your own sense of self-worth, leaning into your own independence, financial and emotional, and being very cognizant of what needs to be left behind when it comes to financial and emotional entanglements with others and codependencies. We're dealing with the North Node in Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio. And indeed, as the North Node transits into Aries next year and the South Node into Libra, the same theme continues. Who are you? What do you want? Me, as opposed to us, us, us. That theme continues. But the house is extremely important, even more important perhaps than the sign. So the house and the whys and the whats, the house and the whats, and I tend to think of the what as the house and the how as the sign, require reflection. And I am urging you, requesting you, thinking that you should think about, as we head towards the end of this solar year, reflect on what the lessons have been. What have the lessons been that have shown up in the Taurus part of your chart? How could you lean into it more effectively in a more Taurian way, but also with regard to developing what you want to develop and go after what you want to go after in that house, in your particular chart, and what needs to be released? And the releases can be mysterious. Is it an object? Is it a thing that needs to be released? Is it a way of being that needs to be released? What is it that needs to be released? One other thing I want to mention to you, I think, now I don't know, this just came to me as I was thinking about this, and those are the connections that become so interesting and relevant. I was reminded of when it is that Jupiter transited through Scorpio last. Gosh. Why is that relevant or important to me? Was it I'm so sorry, as I digress. Jupiter transit in Scorpio. Was it 2018 to 19? Is that what we were looking at? Holy mackerel, yes, October 2017 to November 2018. I think. Unless that's the Jupiter transits. Irrespective, I'm not going to, again, I'm getting sidetracked here. There could very much be a correlation between, and you know, sorry, my mind is turning into a bit of a lightning storm of connections here. When it comes to the Scorpio solar eclipse on October 25th, there are two things that are coming to mind, particularly as they relate to late 2018. One would be that the Venus-Sun conjunction that occurred around that time was mirrored in whatever's happening in the last part of this year. And other astrologers have pointed out, you know, part of the reason why I wanted to do this video was there were a couple of things that I said, one in my Scorpio eclipse video and one in my Taurus eclipse video, that I regretted. I understand why I said them. With the Scorpio eclipse video that I did, I kind of poo-pooed. There was a lot of, whether it was me talking to other people or whether it was what was going on in the internet, there was a lot of talk about this and that. You know, there can sometimes be, when it comes to astrology and when it comes to the internet and when it comes to YouTube, when it comes to videos and things you read and things that flash across your screen, a certain amount of drama. I guess there's a need to click on things, and there's a clickbait component to it. People want the attention, they want to be read. So there can be an over dramatization. And I still feel and still believe that ultimately what we need to know can be boiled down relatively simply. And I don't think that we have been put on this planet to be doing very complicated things astrologically. And I think that it helps to go consult with people, but a lot of things, I don't know that the Spirit wants us to have that much of a distance between what is going on and what is going on in our charts and how we assimilate it. And I would like to make that process more relatable to people so that they are developing a relationship with their own charts without too much of intermediariness and without too much of panic and without feeling like you've got to calculate this and calculate that and stand on your head here and twirl around here 3 times anti-clockwise and, you know, all these kinds of elaborate things that we somehow have to do to mitigate things. And especially in Jyotish, there's so much emphasis on the idea of an upay or a solution, you know, where this gemstone, but I see people doing it and I don't, they might be protected through certain things, but I don't see their lives improving massively or dramatically. If anything, one could argue that even with all of that, their lives have just kind of, if you're not addressing the primary things that you need to address psychologically, emotionally, and taking responsibility for your life, then yes, you'll be able to mitigate certain things and make them better or easier. But if you're not thriving and glowing and anyway, I don't want to keep going there. But in the Scorpio, I kind of downplayed the Venus-Sun conjunction that was happening around that time, and I regretted it because I thought, maybe it is worth looking at. Maybe there is a correlation. It may be something really simple around what was going on in late October 2018 and October to December of 2022. Is there something that started around that time that is somehow cyclically? And I would look at self-worth, but I would look at how that translates. I would look at relationships and finances. We're talking about Venus, and how a certain cycle or chapter might be coming to a close. It doesn't have to be huge or dramatic. When it came to the Taurus eclipse video, I said something I think overly simplistic. And I said something to the extent of, if Saturn is transiting your first house or your second house, it's about you implementing boundaries, and if Saturn is transiting your 7th or 8th house, then it's about other people implementing boundaries around against you. And I realized that is too simplistic, because Saturn, ultimately, when Saturn transits a particular part of your chart, it is about learning to take responsibility and accountability for how you are showing up in that part of the chart. Now, let me just reel myself back in, because I've gone on different tangents. There could be When Jupiter transits a certain part of the chart, as it did Scorpio 2018, it may have created a new beginning there, an ending of a 12-year cycle, start of a 12-year cycle. And as you deal with this eclipses of release, there may be a connection between what started up then and what this release cycle might mean to you as you head towards May the 5th of next year. Okay, I'm just going to leave that there for you to think about. Where does Scorpio sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? What happened around the 2018, late 2000, as you headed towards the end of 2018, 2017 to 2018 time frame there? How did it close out a 12-year cycle, start a 12-year cycle for you potentially? And what role do these eclipses of release have in developing that 12-year cycle that started up then and there? Something to think about. We're leaning into the Taurus part of our chart. We're releasing the Scorpio part of our chart, both in terms of what the signs stand for archetypally and what is going on in those houses, either a way of being, patterns, behaviors. One thing I will say for eclipses, when it comes to the North Node, focus on learnings. When it comes to the South Node, focus on what is being released, but don't overly interfere with what the eclipses are trying to do. Try and take a step back and don't try and over-interpret or even try to interpret what is a benefit or what is a loss. What is a release and the same holds true of Jupiter transits. You know, Jupiter transits the 10th house. I've given this example before and people will say, oh, I'm going to get promoted, and people get laid off. And my point simply is, and I see this happen over again. Jupiter transits is the second house that people are expecting millions and they have a financial crisis. The beginning, an auspicious beginning, the beginning of a 12-year cycle comes on the heels of an ending. It is the start. It is an auspicious start. It is an effort by Jupiter to put you on the right track. And sometimes we are so happily going and traveling on the wrong track that we, be very careful with eclipses when changes are afoot, to let some of them play out and to gauge and determine where you need to act and where you don't need to act and where you need to see things. With eclipses, when I say God takes the wheel and the fates take the wheel, you want to try and get a sense of what is playing out, understand that some of it is out of your control. Go back to some of you, the first couple of weeks of September of this year, and figure out how the Temperance card in the tarot, where that angel is playing with the cups and playing, so many people refer to it as playing with the energies, or float along the river and know when to put your oar in and when to float along with it, when to resist and when not to resist, so that you can come to where it is that Spirit is trying to optimally take you. For some of you, this means endings. For some of you, this means change. For some of you, this might mean resistance to change, whatever, wherever it is, whatever that release needs to take place. And with these Scorpio eclipses, the week before and after December the 25th, March the 5th of next year, and May the 5th of next year are important markers. Now, the Aquarius part of our chart, and this is really what I wanted to talk about in this video. The Aquarius part of our chart is where Saturn is transiting till March the 7th of next year. And it's important because with this November 8th Taurus eclipse, we had Saturn squared the Sun in Taurus and the Moon, the Sun in Scorpio and the Moon in Taurus when we had the eclipse. I talked in the Taurus eclipse video about how things will occur that will point you to where and how you need to continue to develop in the Taurus part of a chart, but you might be acutely aware of where there's a tug of war, or when a portal opens up, what it is that's pulling you back, what might threaten you from walking through that portal and move towards the Taurus part of your chart. And the fact that in some ways, with the presence of Venus and Mercury and Scorpio at the time, and the trines to Neptune and Pisces, and as we talk, the trines to Jupiter and Pisces occurring, that could be a kind of a golden handcuff quality to what it is that needs to be released. So, and with Saturn, there were two things I wanted to say. One, be mindful of the fact that as you are required to, being asked to, feel the urge to move into the Taurus part of your chart, Be aware of where Aquarius sits in your chart, what house it occupies. And with Saturn, always be careful of things like commitments and contracts and things that may bind you or threaten to bind you, that prevent you from moving into the Taurus part of your chart. An awareness of that. With a full moon, awareness, intuitive, emotional awareness, visibility. The moon is full, reflected light of the sun. Yes, it's not solar knowing, which is real quiet knowing. It is knowing of how things may be moving around in the material sphere with the moon. But I wanted to point you to this idea of, as you continue to move forward and build on what this last Taurus eclipse and what the eclipse cycles of 2022 have brought, reflect on, especially as you head towards March the 7th and Saturn is finishing off its transit in Aquarius, reflect on the lessons in the Aquarius part of your chart. I'll come to this in a second. And be mindful of where you could be bound or held back, or the potential for it is there, the threat for that is there in a way that it stymies your development in the Taurus part of your chart. Okay? There's no need to get alarmed and freaked out unless something is going on where you actually need to take steps and contact a lawyer, or take steps or do what needs to be done there. Don't be in denial. But at the same time, this is a general video, and I'm not having the opportunity to talk to each one of you and figure out what's going on in your lives. There is a need to be aware of commitments and contracts and what may bind you, and what you may tacitly or openly be agreeing to or allowing in the Aquarius part of your chart that could affect your development in the Taurus part of your chart and affect the release in the Scorpio part of your chart. Okay? So where does Aquarius sit? What houses does it occupy? What could something binding look like there? The other thing, as a correction to my Taurus eclipse video, is to say that when it comes to Saturn, the word is responsibility. It's not about who's setting boundaries against who, actually, because it could go either way, whether Saturn is transiting a house that stands for you or it stands for the other person. It is about what does mature, responsible, non-reactive, very Saturnian behavior look like in that part of the chart. It could be polite, it could be courteous, it could be unemotionally charged or triggered, or the mature response from a Saturn perspective, maybe the trigger occurs, you have an emotional reaction, you process it, but then when you act in a Saturnian way, and it does not have to be impolite. In a Saturnian way, it can simply be matter of fact and clean and clear and non-reactive. Very important. Saturn's lessons in whatever sign it transits are about how we act and what consequences those actions have. And Saturn does not reward rashness. So whether it is boundary setting, whether it is communication, whatever it is, think about in the Aquarius part of your chart, very important now, between now and March the 7th, to think about how you're going to shore up, build, reflect on ways in which you have acted irresponsibly, rashly, reactively in the Aquarius part of your chart, and what lessons have they taught you? And how could you make life easier for yourself by trying to act more responsibly, non-reactively in that part of the chart? And Saturn, that is the gift. How to handle your life on this 3D plane. All the turmoil, all the lessons, all the feeling like nose to the grindstone, that you can never get a break, you can never get a victory, that this situation or that thing related to the Aquarius part of the chart or the house is against you or not working, or you can't get it to be in the right place. All of that is leading you to this point. And it is important to think of it right now, not only because the Saturn transit is ending, and the ending of a Saturn transit, very important to learn those lessons. I don't want to say, sometimes Saturn can reward you as a result of learning those lessons and give you a pat on the back. And those rewards are more worth having, I find, and more longer lasting than, to some extent, Jupiter's rewards. Sorry, Jupiter. Don't want to piss off Jupiter. But at the same time, they're also really important to think about right now when it comes to handling the release in the Scorpio part of your chart and the leaning into the Taurus part of your chart. Okay? Because of the eclipses and the fact that they were squared. As we get to tomorrow and we leave the whirlpool of the eclipses over the past month or so and reflect on where they have left us and reflect on where 2022 has left us and what the eclipses have taught us, and as the Saturn transit comes to a close and the Jupiter transit in Pisces comes to a close by the end of this year, nothing wrong with reflecting on how to act responsibly in the Aquarius part of your chart and how that might aid where the eclipses of leaning into are asking you to develop in the Taurus part of your chart and what they're asking you to release. Don't over-interpret. Don't be quick to reach a conclusion. What looks a certain way what looks good might end up being bad. What looks bad, just let the eclipses do their thing too. You know, it's so hard to say, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be an active agent when you need to be. Just you know what I'm saying. Just play with the energies, remain alert, be on the boat, know when to put the oar in, and know when not to with the eclipses, so that you can maximize where it is that what it is that the eclipses are trying to get you out of this situation. What is or needs to be eclipsed in and out of your life? What is the correlation with what happened around 2017 into 2018 into early 2019 even to some extent with what is going on now in the Scorpio part of your chart? I will leave these musings to you. I know there were other videos I said I would do, but I think this was more important right now. And if you like it, found it useful, feel free to share it, like the video, comment on it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the bell icon so that you're notified when I do new videos, and I will leave you to it. Thank you for your patience. I know I'm sporadic when I do my videos, but I hope you find these videos useful and helpful. Take care.